Pretend awesome!
Okay.
And your play.
All right, welcome to Plus 10 to Awesome. And we have an interview with somebody who's kickstarting a game. Did you already start the Kickstarter? Is it finished or is it ongoing?
We did. We started the Kickstarter on Friday, the first day of Strategicon.
Oh, fabulous. I'm Jim, by the way, and you are?
My name is Luke Laurie. I'm the designer of the game Stones of Fate.
So we're talking about Stones of Fate here, and I understand it's a card game that uses sort of a tarot deck.
It is. A lot of people describe it as kind of an area control game that doesn't use a board. It has some memory elements, and it has different strategic and tactical elements as well. It does use a tarot deck of 78 cards with special symbols that are printed on the edges of the cards. And each player has 5 stones, and they use the 5 stones and place them between cards and around the cards, and then flip the cards in order to win them. You see, the game is played with all of the cards face down, and players are able to peek at the cards and have limited knowledge about the playing area. And as the play continues, they gather information and then use the information to choose which cards to flip and attempt to win, earning cards to gain more points.
All right, I also understand there's a mechanic where you want to give unfavorable cards to other players as well.
There are negative cards that you don't want to win, and there are negative cards that allow you to give them to other players. And this works out kind of as an attack mechanic, where you're able to find those special cards and use them against players who may be a little bit ahead of you, and so forth. There are also special abilities on many of the cards, which, as the cards are flipped or when they are won, can confer special advantages or disadvantages to players that they will need to weigh when they make the decision about which cards to flip.
What kind of suits are we talking about? Are you talking the regular rods and cups of a tarot deck?
Yeah, so it uses the suits of the tarot, includes the major arcana, the coins and wands, they call them coins and pentacles.
Pentacles, yeah.
These ones look more like coins in this version. And then it's fairly standard tarot. It's all the exact same cards in a regular tarot deck. But the tarot theme isn't really oppressive to the game. People who aren't into the tarot won't find that they have to know anything about tarot or be into tarot in order to enjoy the game.
Okay, so it's sort of like more like a thematic part of the game and a visual part of the game instead of an integral part of the play.
Exactly, and by getting the artwork of Ciro Marchetti, it adds a really great feel to the game in terms of the cards. They're absolutely stunningly beautiful.
Yeah, I actually collect some tarot card decks myself. I started off with the Mage Tarot for the Mage the Ascension game and found those so cool that I loved the art of them and ended up collecting a bunch of different tarot decks, which is, you know, a really appealing part of the game if you're a collector of that kind of thing. So how many cards in there are the standard number of cards in the deck, so it's like a poker deck plus your arcana.
Yeah.
So how many players is this for?
So Stones of Fate is for 2 to 4 players. The game is slightly different depending on how many players are playing. In a 2-player game, the players play with a 6-card spread. It's 2 rows of 3 cards, and the cards as they are won and removed from the spread, new cards are brought in that feed into that, and there are 16 cards in this deck that feeds in. For 3 players, you move it up to a 3x3 grid of 9 cards in the spread, and for 4 players, there are 9 cards in the spread as well. But the draw decks are different sizes so that you have the same opportunity to win approximately the same number of cards regardless of the number of players.
So you adjust the deck and you also adjust the cards in play depending on the number of players you have.
And yes, and because they're randomly dealt out and each time you make a deck to play with, every single game of Stones of Fate is different.
So how does your initial draw impact your ability to be able to win the game versus you know, the actual active gameplay being able to give you a tactical advantage?
So players don't actually have hands in Stones of Fate. What they have is the cards that are out in the spread will give them the opportunities to win those special cards. There can be variances in the point values and the abilities that are present. But in general, it's about players thinking about and studying about how the card interactions will affect the game that will determine how it progresses. We found that players who are good at one version of the game, the next time they play, they'll also be good at that, even though you have different circumstances that they're facing.
Are there synergies and abilities of the cards, or are you just going for point values, or is there sort of a metagame where you're trying to figure out one card keying off the other and building a strategy on the cards that you draw?
There is a metagame in terms of that there can be some small combos and some interactions that will be beneficial on multiple layers. But it isn't like a game where you have to keep track of a series of 5, 6, 7 different steps that are all going to come into play. Rather, players' thinking is more about control of these spaces and determining which areas are beneficial for them to be placing their stones. The synergies can be amazing. There are possibilities where a player can flip a card over here that will enable them to flip a card over here that will cause them to flip another card that could give a negative card over here and a positive card here and a positive card here. And so players who are able to synthesize a lot of that kind of information can find that kind of gameplay in Stones of Fate.
So I really enjoy games that once you've learned how to play, it takes you maybe 15 minutes to actually learn, but then you start picking up on nuances of the game, and it becomes so in-depth and intricate that every time you play it, you learn something new and you pick up on something, and it sort of turns into a learning process, and it's the longevity of the game stays. So you can play it over and over and over again, and you're excited about playing it the next time to see what happens at that point because you figured something new out. So exactly. that has that kind of element in it. So that's really cool. So you said people have these stones that they bid for cards. How does that mechanic work?
So each player has 5 stones, and they each have one color that they're assigned. So a player has an individual color. And on their turn, they're able to take 2 actions. And the 2 actions are chosen from any combination of 3 choices. They can peek at a card, they can move a stone, or they can flip a card. They can do 2 of any of those or mix and match, however they choose, in whatever order. So a player can place 2 stones. They can choose to peek and then place a stone. And so as the gameplay proceeds, it's turn-based. So each player's taking these 2 actions. It happens fairly quickly. Some players come into Stones of Fate thinking, well, it has a memory element, it's going to be a slow game. It's not. It's a fairly quick game, and the duration with which you have to memorize things is pretty short. So you take your stones and you plot out the locations that will be most beneficial to you based on your knowledge of the cards that are there. You flip the cards, and then we look at the symbols on the sides and determine who wins the cards, and what effects take place.
Okay, so the position of the actual cards actually has a determination on what cards get flipped depending on the positions of the stone. Is that the way it works?
The players choose to flip any card that they choose, and their movement or placement of the stones can be from anywhere to anywhere. For the players, the decision is most about, is this the prime time to flip a given card? Sometimes that can be, I'm going to flip this card because my stones are in the position to win it. Sometimes it could be, I'm going to flip this card because I think this player is going to try to get their stones in a position to win it. I will prevent them from winning it. Okay. Or it could be, I'm going to flip this card that's completely out of the way because it's one that I don't want, I don't think anyone wants, and I'm just going to get it out of the way.
But really, there actually is a game board, but the game board is actually made by a spread of cards.
Precisely.
And that's the way that
it's
works.
Like so many of these really interesting games out there where it really could have been built with a board, but it's not really a necessary element. The game's far more portable. All you need is the stones and a deck of cards. We've taken it many times and just sat down in a restaurant or a bar or a lounge or waiting room, and you can play the game with pretty small surface area.
So you demoed it here at Gamex. Do you plan on demoing it anywhere else?
Oh, yes.
Or do you have a broad spectrum of places that you demo this?
Yeah, this is our second Strategicon that we've been to. Last year, the game, in an earlier form, won the Poly Prize at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. We have brought it to several mini cons in the Central Coast area. It'll be going back to PolyCon. It's going to a science fiction convention in North Carolina. It's been played at many conventions associated with Gen Con in Indiana, and we will be at Gen Con this year.
Oh,
also.
fabulous, fabulous.
Whether or not the Kickstarter succeeds, Stones of Fate will be at Gen Con, and we'll be back at Polycon this year too.
So they can find you by searching Stones of Fate in Kickstarter. Do you have any other websites or anything else that people can contact you at?
Cosmic Wombat Games.
Cosmic Wombat.
Taken
Love
over all the work with the publishing, and so Cosmic Wombat Games has a website for Stones of Fate, and we're up on Kickstarter now until June 23rd, and we're excited to see how that turns out. So far, we've got a lot of excited backers, and this weekend we showed it to so many people who are so excited about signing up and getting their friends in on it too.
Yeah, this is a record-breaking Gamex, so you had a lot of people coming over here, and that's great. So if any of this interests you and you are intrigued by this very cool and unique tarot-based resource management boardless awesome game, go ahead and check out the link that I'm going to put underneath this video, and hit them up on Kickstarter and support their game. And I'd like to thank you so much, Luke, for joining us.
Thank you very much.
All right, great.
Really appreciate it.
Bye.